So hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to the April Mupudig webinar featuring a presentation by the inimitable Liz Neely, who will be sharing her work with us soon. A couple of notes just before we get started. As a reminder, we are recording. This will be posted to the Mupudig YouTube channel afterwards. And we encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, where you're calling in from. It's always great to see who's on the call and joining us today, particularly if there are any first timers. But with that, I will just kind of give a brief introduction to Liz, who is the curator of digital experience at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. And some people who were able to go to NMPS last year or to MCN might have heard some variant of this presentation from Liz, who's doing really, really exciting work around integrated, beyond publishing, but for the interest of this particular group, really thinking about publishing in the most expansive way, the integration of digital collections, thinking about data visualization, and basically what are the possibilities for presenting material digitally, new research and encouraging learning through a bunch of projects that she's done at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum and the work that she's doing right now on the Georgia O'Keeffe Catalog Raisonné, which she's going to share probably some sneak peeks at what that might look like. So with no further ado, I will hand it over to Liz.
Thanks so much, Katie. And I'm so happy to be here. And as Katie mentioned, I've always a little bit considered myself an interloper with this group. So I might be coming at this from a slightly different angle, but hopefully that's helpful. And the other asterisks is for those of you who might have seen a lot of my presentations looking at you, John Gordy, it might be a little repetitive. But that's the nature of our work, right? It just builds upon ourselves. So hopefully there's still something to get out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I hope you just see a screen in that presenter view. Is that true? Great. Yes. They've improved Zoom a lot here. So I think the way when I was thinking about this group and how I interact with it, I was really thinking about how we think in terms of ecosystems here at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, as do all of you. But I think that one of the key things about why it will why my angle might be a little different is because I'm at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, which is a very, squarely medium-sized museum, but we do not have a publishing department, but we do have a research center. So I think that the way that we think about ecosystems is even more important because we only have one or two people thinking about everything and maintaining everything. Not that, every museum has its stresses on how much we have for people, but I think that that's how we are really thinking about this as a broader thing. These are some pictures from the different collections we have. So why don't I just, for those of you who aren't quite familiar with the O'Keeffe Museum, we are here in sunny Santa Fe, New Mexico, even sunnier than I thought this morning. And we have a museum, so galleries here in Santa Fe. We have a research center that's also here in Santa Fe, and we also have historic homes and properties. So two of her historic homes, about an hour and a half from Santa Fe here, which one of those can be toured, but also that then holds a lot of the personal belongings of Georgia O'Keeffe, so that we can look at the context there. Just to give a little context around these images, the galleries, that's in my role. I also work with in person, which I won't get into much here. How do we use digital and interactive in-person experiences? So these are some postcards that we made for viewing. And the center picture is actually a Wikipedia edit-a-thon. So really thinking about how we also get different perspectives on through that. And some of you may recognize Corey and Sina, who are consultants in accessibility, and that was a visit they made. So also thinking all through all of this on how we can be better with accessibility. So probably won't be a huge surprise. The mission of the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum is to celebrate the art, life, and independent spirit of Georgia O'Keeffe. But I think it's important for me to put that there because I think that is really part of going back to the mission, and what we're trying to accomplish here is key to where we go forward. And then, of course, in our series of organizational goals, that we provide accurate information and resources to local and global audiences. And in thinking about this goal, of course, this isn't just about the things that we have in our collection. This is about this person and her contexts in general. This is a Tob Webb photo of Georgia O'Keeffe exploring the Southwest. So when I first started working with the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, I was asking, what is the problem? And so everything and kind of the principles that we move forward with our publishing ecosystem and the different things that we produce is really going back to what is the problem trying to be solved. And for the most part, it's researchers and curators and other museum professionals come to the museum for expertise about all things O'Keeffe. But information and resources are difficult to access, even for staff, and expectations fall short. So then in relation to that, we come up with this kind of a statement about that. What do we want to create? A content and design strategy focused on relationships between objects, between people, for researchers, curators, and other museum professionals. So that is our key audience. That doesn't mean we don't serve other audiences, but for this kind of publishing, this would be our core audience that addresses the needs, the full picture context of the artist and her context, and helps us achieve the museum mission. This is definitely a slide that if you've been following along, I've been using for a long time, but it kind of gives, sorry, that you are not on this slide yet. When we looked at what the problem we were trying to solve, we looked at what connections. We started with collections. How do we connect these collections and start telling stories that are about the connections between these collections and relationships? But of course, like many of you, we have all of these collections are kind of cataloged according to different cataloging standards and by different people, by registrars, by library staff, by archivists, and by digital staff. So it was definitely not our idea to start smushing these things together, because we wanted to follow the professional practices for cataloging and collection management in each thing. So really looking at, how do we make the connections between these collections without compromising on those cataloging standards? And how do we work together to think about how data can be interoperable in scalable ways? And finally, of course, there's also that we knew that we wanted to connect to resources outside of the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, other artworks, so the full body of artwork around Georgia O'Keeffe. And someday I'd love to have pointers to all of the important archives around the world. That is not on the roadmap yet, but I would love it to be. So this kind of leads us to our key ecosystem principles. And why do we have these? So this really tells us what direction we take things in, whether it's from the back end, whether it's on design, that kind of thing. So a focus on relationships helps tell a broader story of the artist and her contexts. Interconnected digital experiences help audiences discover and explore from a variety of angles. So it's not one voice only. Sustainability helps secure long-term access to resources and supports new services. So we'll be coming back to that along the way. And then coming back to that, like, where did this actually lead us? So we also wanted everything. One of those ecosystem principles is also being user-centered, which I should just add to that. So we want it user-centered, scalable, and sustainable. So for us and our audiences, aesthetics matter, and likely for many of your audiences too. So I'm kind of going through the collections online as it looks now. It didn't look like this when we first went out there, but similar. So focusing on these relationships and how things interconnect. Looking at this, we don't only connect based on object to object, but also providing the detailed information. And then if we go back to the relationships, but also on the people to people. So I accidentally zoom in on Lon Hamilton's crotch. Sorry about that. And but the people here. So also the people are connectors. So this is Georgia O'Keeffe. So she's a mega connector. So she's mentioned in something, she's depicted in something. So this is about the emphasizing relationships. She's the artist of, photographer, designer, correspondent. So instead of defining, along the side here, we are pulling information from Wikipedia. So really, instead of the museum, this kind of gets that relationships, the aesthetics, is that really thinking about how the data itself, and I'll talk to a little bit more about that, defines what we're looking at, instead of us saying, George O'Keeffe was an artist and a correspondent and a friend, you know, that kind of thing. So really pulling those relationships from the data itself, and like then also through dates and time. And so where can we actually emphasize relationships on multiple levels? Another place of that, how we really looked at that first launch, is thinking about these FAIR principles and how we actually would, from the back end, do this. And some of you may have heard of linked art. This is a target model for linked open data. If that's not your thing, then it's the only thing that to understand about that is just understanding that from the very beginning, how we built the infrastructure also had to emphasize relationships, interconnectedness, and interoperability with other sites. So the definition off their website is linked art is a usable, standards-based way to describe cultural heritage. So this also gets down for those of you who do cataloging. So it's a portion of based on CDOC CRM, using Getty vocabularies as key glue points. We also use at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, Library of Congress vocabularies, particularly Library of Congress Names Authority file and LCNAF, because a lot of that interconnectedness is not necessarily with artists. So getting into that context so that we can get a broader view, particularly here in the Southwest, where maybe people aren't, even artists aren't covered as completely as others. So there's a link to that too. And I will shout out here, and we have Dwayne on the call here, is it's a good time to point out that our technical partners and designers and developers from back in 2017 have been Design for Context, which is Dwayne Degler, who's on the call here. So it's been a great partnership, and they worked with the American Art Collaborative on linked art, which was a which was also exploring this and that this kind of interconnectivity. And they did a lot of legwork so that we could kind of rest on their shoulders a little bit. So Dwayne's here if we have any deeper questions about that. So for those of you, again, in maybe libraries or metadata standards, this FAIR principles is something that the linked art also and other things that we're doing kind of gets us to, making sure that everything we do abides by findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable principles. So, and I think that this this graph actually describes a lot of what that is. So I'm going to get actually into what it looks like for our core audience group, but I did want to mention that we do have a museum linked data browser here for documentation on all of this. And this would be more for developers who wanted to use the data. So this is how things are mapped, how how it looks from the link from the more data standpoint. All right. So one of the things that as we move forward and looking at those principles, what were the ways that we could incrementally get to points where we're adding more value and also connecting collections on different levels, expanding kind of this story around George O'Keeffe. And one of the things that really, when we did our interviews of our core audiences, historic exhibitions was something that was actually pretty hard to get at from the print catalog raisonné or from other sources. And it was also a great way to start connecting to other collections and connecting archives. So I'll just show a little bit about how that is. So this is our historic collection, historic exhibitions area. And this also dips our toe into the catalog raisonné. So looking at this, we can choose a year, a time frame to look for an exhibition. I'm going to pull up the 1946 MoMA. It shows installation photography, has a modern description of this here, points out the curator. So that's a key, again, those relationships. We can zoom into what the installation photography, and we don't have installation photography for many of the works, but actually that's something that our Catalog Raisonné project will work on. And then pulling together what are archives and publications that are related to that. Is it mentioned in a publication? And then here the exhibition checklist, but seen not as a list, but as records. So you can see this is something that's currently in the Art Institute of Chicago. If I click on this, it will actually go to the Art Institute of Chicago's site. But also we were dealing with multi-venue. So this is one venue, a 1946, but I'm going to look at Living Modern, which had 7 venues. So then having more of a venue record to kind of show all of the places that has been. We keep populating more curators for each exhibition. And then we can go to one of those because we know that exhibition checklists are different at each of the sites. And across the board, we can filter and look at more closely what's there and kind of also page through the other touring exhibitions. And this is something we went live with the print ones back in 2022 and teasing the catalog raisonné as well, because this is something that now it's a key research to expand on this and get more installation photography and start collecting more exhibition ephemera. So this also another way of making those interconnectedness and viewing things in a different way is through a data visualization. And I'm going to actually pause this for a second. This seems like a lot of different products, but all of these historic exhibitions, the data visualization are still based on that core infrastructure. So one of those key, that sustainability key is making sure that we're not building separate kind of things when we don't need to. Of course, there's separate code that goes behind this, but when I do a data update, when we change the name of something and we change that across the board or the date, it all kind of goes through the pipeline. So it's not kind of one-offs that are, one and done. It's all interconnected and sustainable on the back end. So we did a lot of research on this or user research around this and prototyping. And I actually have a whole talk on this. So if people are interested in that, I can, that shows the kind of sketches and things that we did. I can share that video. Because with historic exhibitions, our end users that are key audience knew pretty much what they wanted. When I went to our core audience and said, hey, what do you think about data visualization to look at things differently? It was not something that that audience was used to. So in order to go to them and think, well, how could we look at the information differently? We really had to think about building prototypes and looking at that. And in the end, the this bar chart here, which I'll start showing now, was really what resonated with people because it was familiar. And then some of the key insights that we got from our users was it had to have images. It had to actually show what the images were, that so that they could get to the core evidence of why we were selecting something. Agency was really important. So the researcher needed to be able to select what they were looking for. So that's why we added the check boxes. They needed to be able to zoom in so I can go to a date range. So all of these things were really important that we added to this, that it be readable, that have the thumbnails, that they could view the evidence behind it, and select the kinds of things. We also made it so you can download wherever you are. So if I've zoomed in on this and I have a certain graph, I can download that and use it for a PowerPoint. So again, this is also a step towards the catalog raisonné, because this is looking at the full body of work, not just as is historic exhibitions. It's not just looking at things in the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum collections. It's looking at everything that is that she has in that 1999 print catalog raisonné is here. So something that might resonate to more of this group, the kind of next product and extension that we needed to think about was narrative content. And this kind of fit into a broader content strategy around how do we produce multiple voices around our content? How do we actually have more stories around that are collections based and that linked those things on a different level, but also get different voices in there. So instead of having essays related to the collections objects or the entities out there, we wanted to make sure that these were multi-platform so that it would last longer, but have it interconnected. So we weave the publications onto a collections online ecosystem. We are using, many of you may be familiar with Quire, the open source tool from the Getty, and we use that mainly because we did want multi-platform. We wanted a web, we wanted it to be responsive, we wanted a PDF version. We want EPUB, that we haven't extended that. We haven't used that much, but it is a sustainable standards base, so that fits our ecosets of principles. And also selected Quire because of the museum community support, which I've been very impressed by. So shout out to Greg, who I know is on the call. Maybe Aaron is too. It's easy to extend and built on Eleventy. And actually, that was something that was recently changed over to a platform by the Getty's work. So that's why we went with this. So it's separate from the collections, but it's connected. So I'm gonna go, oh, I forgot there is a video there. Why don't I play the video? So this kind of shows what we did here. So this is Exhibiting O'Keeffe, our first one out there. It's in Spanish and in English. It will look a lot like a lot of other Quire publications if you're familiar. Looking at this, of course, this has different authors. There are references within here that link back to our collections online within the text. So if I look at this here, but also, so we have the Spanish, the PDF. But this is where the index, this is where it connects with the linked data on the collection. So this is the integration. I don't write this portion. This portion is here. It's collected from the information. So it shows where archives mentioned. So if it sees an archive, I can say, look at this back in the text. Where's the reference to this object or archive? Or I can also go there and choose one of these and actually go to Collections Online record and see the original record. And you'll see this is going to a person record, Alfred Stieglitz, and then this two-way street means that if I actually find that he's mentioned here, it goes to the first reference within this publication here. This is replicable, so this isn't live yet. This is a prototype we've made of an exhibition guide. So it might be a little messy here because it's just my prototype, but I'm going to fix this up. So here we're using multimedia content. So we have an audio tour that's in Bloomberg Connects, but how can we add that to here? Installation photography. So this is not only for someone who can't come to the museum, but it also can serve as a something that lasts beyond the exhibition. So also multi-platform, and it also has the data index. So these are the things that as we created, we're actually producing one now for a Welcome Center exhibition. Our Welcome Center is near the home, so an hour and a half away, and from Santa Fe, as if Santa Fe wasn't hard enough to get to. So we've already had requests, so we are going to actually make, because we're already translating all of the label copy, all of the text panels into Spanish, and it's already edited. We'll add an essay, we'll get the installation photography, we'll use the already created talks that go along, so the videos. So this will become something that we do with each exhibition, is created into this exhibition guide publication so that we not only have someplace for someone to go now, but when the exhibition closes, it then becomes a publication and something that's part of the ecosystem to start building, again, those new stories, because this will be linked to artworks, it will be linked to blenders and coffee makers that are out there in the thing. So as I pointed out, I kind of mocked this up. So this would show that this work was in 2 different kind of publications. So it's mentioned in, but it also is not just the object. It is here on an exhibition page. So if there's an exhibition and it's mentioned in, if it's a person, if it's an organization. So really, again, you know, enhancing that discoverability and connectivity. And since this is the publishing group, and some of you may be in Choir, just wanted to show how we're doing that. So this is the markdown behind the scenes for making a link in Choir. So it gets a bracket here, and then you put the link afterwards. And this is the link data URI. Well, data is the official one, but this one works. And when we want it to be in the index, it gets this mention out there. So that means I, as the producer, have control over what ends up in that data index and what doesn't. So that could be here where it's an actor. So this is the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. So this means that it would show up on the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum agent page. And down here is more of an object. So here we link it to the View on Georgia O'Keeffe Museum website. And here, and when it pulls this link, it actually doesn't pull this that it says View on Museum website. It pulls the information from that data. So pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about this. And again, since this is the publishing crowd, this is how these were our steps for going through there. This is a lot of words, but knowing that we don't have a publishing department. So this was kind of the workflow that we did in terms of authoring, then links added, then editorial reviews, transformed as markdown. But we did find it was pretty important to know this order so that you didn't go do double work. So that the editor could see it in the format they want. We did have the editor re-review it once it was in layouts, which is in the Choir. And we haven't edited a new markdown. I did it, but we could use her for that. So that's kind of the workflow that we went through. So I have teased the digital account, like I've skimmed on a lot of things, and I've teased that from that very beginning, when we set those principles, we knew where we wanted to be. I've been at the O'Keeffe Museum 6 years, and I consulted there for a couple of years before that. So I think this was always a little bit our North Star of that. The dream was that we would allow that people would come to us, they would find at least pointers to anything, to any artwork, Georgia O'Keeffe, updated information, and then how does that connect to archives or other works? So this has been the dream, and I'm happy to say that phase one, we are currently in the process of, thanks to IMLS. So we're lucky, and I think this crowd knows a catalog raisonné is all of the works by an artist. This is I think this is the one crowd that might actually know what a catalog raisonné is. Other people, it's a pretty niche term, which is why we might not even call it a catalog raisonné when we go out there, because it might be that actually might be limiting our user base. So we already have a print edition from Barbie Bureau Lines that was published by the National Gallery Art and the Georgia O'Keeffe Foundation. So that's kind of our basis. And this will be a linked Dart-based browser and data platform. So it will be an extension of what we already have. We won't have a separate collections online and a catalog raisonné. This will be the catalog raisonné will be the basis. So that's going back to our sustainability and how we want everything that we do to be the core of what we do, so that we don't have sidecars that go out of date. We want to think about what we bring along from print-like formats and what is best served by the database. So I think in some ways this will be what we've learned from Quire on some places, and then also what we've learned from the search and discovery on a data platform, and then also how we can use data visualization to for serendipity. That's one of the key things that when we did our user research is people find the print publication a very serendipitous way of finding other things. And so how can we enhance that? Because of course the print edition only allows a certain way of serendipitously finding things through paging through, right? So how can we think about actually other ways that we can use data visualizations or images to allow for even more of that? Accessibility is at the core. Part of the grant is to write descriptions for all these, although AI is helping us with a lot of that. And this will be information exchange arrangements made with 140 so public institutions. We're focusing on publish. So you might hear from me or one of my people in the near future. We're starting with trying to get exhibition installation photography for looking at that. And then we will be reaching out to those 140 to see if we can get new images. Most of our images right now are from the Malcolm Varon photography for the catalog raisonné, so scan transparencies. So we'll be asking a lot of your institutions for if we can share photography, updated photography, and data from that, and also have that inter-exchange with all of you. So one of the things, and I'll just quickly go through this all still goes back to remembering our ecosystem principles, and that is how we will continue to approach the catalog raisonné. And I just pulled out one aspect of what which I'm really excited about. I think that the biggest change in some ways is between what we have now and what the future looks like, is that really what we've learned from our end user base is about their workflows and how they use the print catalog raisonné, how they use collections online. And a lot of it is like, a lot of people have different workflows, but a lot of people are using things, they're getting things, they're copying and pasting, or their curatorial assistants they're making new databases, they're making checklists. Again, going back to our core audiences, they're making presentations. So really one of the most exciting, and one of the things I'm most excited about is how do we build kind of hooks into the workflow, and how do we build to the point where this can be really highly usable in supporting those user workflows. I don't want to recreate those user workflows because we know everyone has difference. And every time we've tried to do that, so really user interviews revealed a lot of different ways. So they discuss collecting information, sorting it, printing it through printouts or PDFs, browser bookmarking, creating binders, developing their own local databases in Airtable or even FileMaker. There's a set of work to determine these specifications and features supporting these. So we haven't done all of these designs in this work, right? It's on our agenda, right, Dwayne? But I think top level, we need it still be beautiful. Everything still has to be beautiful. It has to have a beautifully printable format, so where you can get all of the information downloadable. So printable is kind of like the same as downloadable PDF. We are going to be really looking at user created lists so that you can I'm thinking about even the curators we have here at the O'Keeffe Museum. Everyone makes this checklist differently. How can I support that? How do I get images in their hands? How do I get the right information in a checklist? How do we make sure that we're delivering that image so that it's not a 2 GB image inside of a Excel document? I know we've all seen it. Also thinking about various output types. You know, to make a visit, you know, you could even think that someone would be making a visit, whether that's a researcher or an enthusiast, that they want to see, they want to make a list of what they want to see, or they want to make a request of our archivist or our registrar to see something. And then various types of list output. Think a list could be a PDF, a list could be a print style sheet. It could be for a presentation, so it could be more like a PowerPoint. It could be data. So again, if I would love to see an Excel output from the catalog raisonné from a list, a CSV, but I think that most of our audience would more understand what an Excel is. So really thinking about, even in the future, could we have data outputs that are EPUB, that are that look more like a Acquire publication, that are a data like that, take that list and put it into a data visualization, even JSON LD, that kind of thing. So we'll have to pick and choose some for this first phase, but really thinking about how we can meet users where they need to be more easily. Definitely moving forward with downloadable images. They won't be open access images yet, but for this type of, for research purposes, to be able to download an image and then easily, again, meeting our users where they need to be, having an easily copy and pastable caption so that it's always the way that we want it to be. Then it can be edited, of course. I've gotten requests for easily copy and pastable tombstones. So really focusing on those little things to make it easier to use. And then, of course, a little bit off topic on supporting user workflows, but making sure that it's citable. So this means transparent version control and making sure that a person knows when it was last updated, what has changed, and being able to go back to a previous version. That's the dream. Oh, I guess before I go into that one, so that's kind of that's where I'll tease the, we've got loads of ideas on this, and happy to go through that more deeply at another time, maybe when we have designs. And then again, like moving forward and looking at those principles, like really have been experimenting also with how generative AI, how the catalog raisonné. So what are these different entry points for the catalog raisonné, right? And what is it serving? Is it serving a data use? Is it serving a PowerPoint use? Is it serving a making of a checklist or a visit, or I'm trying to make a list of things I need to license? But it also could be a source for generative AI. And reading a lot about lately about how linked data and structured data and unstructured data can really be a conversational interface, and thinking about, well, this is probably for a more enthusiast audience. So how do you ask questions and how to answer back? How do we learn more about our audiences when they're asking questions, what they need? So actually if you're on our mailing list, you'll get a survey today in our mailing list asking what your, if you had questions about Georgia O'Keeffe, what would you ask? And we actually are going to take those and run them through, and how do we actually turn basic questions into humanities learning experiences. These are some things that we're thinking about in terms of other uses for the CR. So this is just an old example. I made a catalog raisonné assistant here. I said, oh, you know, did she do anything with Pedernal? And it said, you know, came back, said who they are. It's supposed to give it to me with a catalog raisonné number. It's inconsistent. It's supposed to tell me where, who owns them. But so this is actually looking at the catalog raisonné and pulling up. Now, this is a very art historical question and answer. But just think if someone could just ask instead of search. So not everyone is used to looking at finding aids and archives and searching a database. So our theory, our hypothesis here is that actually this is something that could even make the catalog raisonné and our data even more broadly accessible. So with that, I will wrap it up here. I could have put logos all over these screens. I did forget to mention earlier that our audience research has been led by HG&Co, Kate Haley Goldman at HG&Co. I mentioned Design for Context, key partners on the experiments on AI. I want to hat tip a John Gordy, who I know is on this call, who has been a good thought partner. Bruce Wyman has also been a great, who is a consultant, has been a great thought partner on that part. And none of this would be possible without key funding from the Institute for Museum and Library Services, IMLS, the Toma Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. So just to say, strategy has developed by thinking about what the problem is and who it's going to be solved for. So that kind of builds where is our ecosystem going. We focused on, talked to, and built for non-technically focused, highly visual audiences in making key decisions. Strategy design followed established principles, focusing on relationships, interconnectedness, and sustainability. So that's what that ecosystem is all about. And that we looked at linked data to be a sustainable, scalable, and interoperable system. So hopefully that all connected together. Or it just shows how my brain works. I don't know. So happy to answer questions. How did I do? 45. Okay. I guess not bad.
Thank you, Liz. That was awesome and really inspiring. And just also, you know, proof of what is possible, even with like a small and mighty team, through having a very clear sense of purpose and knowing the why of what you're doing it, and putting together a team of people with expertise to help you do it. So you don't have to be the biggest institution in the world to do something as impressive as you guys are doing at the O'Keeffe Museum, which is wonderful. So if people have questions for Liz, you can put them in the chat, you can raise your hand if you want to come off mic and ask Liz directly. I had a couple questions, but one that I was curious about was, you know, I really like how you kind of think about how all of your projects build off of each other, and sort of how you're kind of complementing, or you can like make use of the resources that you've essentially developed. So for the Exhibiting O'Keeffe publication, in terms of the sort of conceptualization and development of that, was it kind of really born from, hey, we now have this information about, like, we have data that it is possible for us to look at or ask questions about or contextualize, so that's going to be the next topic that we'll write about? how was that sort of by, your curatorial colleagues at the museum, kind of how was that developed and scoped in terms of thinking about what that looked like as a publication?
Yeah, because the real reason for having this publishing platform was to get a variety of voices. And so I'm not sure if like such a art historic or topic would have been necessarily the first one to showcase that. But really why that came to be is when we were putting together historic exhibitions, we knew which we knew was a key feature that a lot of our audience wanted, and it helped us get one step closer to a catalog raisonné because it meant getting all of the things together. So getting the historic exhibitions out there was important, but I also knew that a lot of those exhibitions would be pretty thin. They would basically have the name, the dates, and then the checklist, because there wasn't a huge research project that went along with it. Hopefully now with the catalog raisonné, there is. So, so we knew that there would be, a very small portion that had a lot of information around it. So, but how would people find that? How would people find the ones or care about finding the ones that we happen to have deeper content about? So really thinking about the first publication was, how do we celebrate this new feature, historic exhibition, by showcasing why we think historic exhibitions are important? And so talk to Barbara Buell-Lines, who is the author of the catalog raisonné, and working with different scholars in the field. So Amy von Lintel, just talked to her, and I said, what, we were thinking about something in Texas, and at first it was only going to be one exhibition. She's like, well, actually, I'd love to talk about the relationship between, and we love that word relationship, so it always gets my interest, between how the historically the institutions, the cultural institutions in Texas kind of used Georgia O'Keeffe, because she was, as Amy says, just Texas enough, or just Western enough, but just modern enough to actually get them into to showcase that they were not just showing, they were modern and contemporary at the time art museums instead of just Remington in the West. So so it was really through discussions with various scholars on picking those. Like Barbara Buell-Lines actually picked MoMA 1946, but if you read the essay, it's really about how she's debunking the myth about the tagline was "Finally a Woman on Paper," and she's debunking that myth. And so really I talked to these scholars and said, what are the and I had seen Sarah Kelly Erler do a talk for us about the relationship between Daniel Catton-Rich and Georgia O'Keeffe, particularly around the Stieglitz collection. But how did that 1943 retrospective develop that relationship? So really just kind of seeing who was talking about these things and how, and then giving some latitude to those scholars to say, how do you feature why historic exhibitions matter now and in the creation of looking at our cultural sector actually right now. So that's how that kind of came to be, so that it really could be something that could point back to, provide references to, and really celebrate that new feature.
Great, thank you. I like the idea of sort of taking it organically, and that where are there those areas of strength to draw out, like as a use case for like why the research can matter. Michelle Padilla has a question in the chat saying, if I understood correctly at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned pulling in content from outside sources, including Wikipedia. How do you ensure that the sources you pull from are reliable? And I mean, in general, also, it's not just Wikipedia, but you're linking to all of these other institutions, you know, as a core, you know, part of your practice. So you could even just be dealing with like redirects or broken links or other things, much less, you know, the information itself being reliable. So how do you kind of consider those questions or concerns?
Yeah, I think that the links is one thing, because we can know, even if we have, which we don't have agreements with places yet, but we kind of just pulled in the data and showed what was the catalog raisonné, what was the current title. And even when we have arrangements, we know that we're not going to be the first thing people think of when a title changes and things like that. So that's why I think what we have right now is a little bit of a bridge, because I think with the catalog raisonné, it'll be very important for us to say this was last updated on, so that people will know when that was pulled, so that if the Art Institute changes the name of a title, we know that this was the name of the title at this point. When we find a link, we fix it. As part of this new project, there will be crawlers finding broken links so that we can find them more quickly. Now it's a little this is an evolution. And if any of you were looking at the screens, when I was making the presentation, I'm like, oh, that needs to be fixed. I mean, why doesn't it have Juan Hamilton depicted? I mean, why only the female? So there's always something. So we'll have link crawlers to find the broken things. In terms of pulling in information from other institutions, like I think all of that will get reviewed, but I think the institution, of course, so if it has a different title, this next project would be, hi, why do you have the different title? And we'll see if we have the reasoning behind why is the title changed. And then based on Wikipedia, I just have to believe that that is out there, and people are going there first for a lot of things. And so I think living in in the whole ecosystem of the web and of generative AI and everything, is that in some ways we have to get the different sources out there. And so if it has a different date, if it has a different name, we need to present both of those things, because the users are going to go to those other sources too. And if we find key issues, then we can be part of that. And that's why we have editathons here and things like that. Particularly, our findings haven't been so much around wrong data in Wikipedia, but in terms of what the angle is, particularly around female artists and that kind of thing. So we did our Wikipedia editathon with art and feminism, and really focused our presentation to the people there on like looking at those, looking at which ones have been fixed in terms of female artists not being only defined by their or mostly defined by their partners, and how you talk about their relationships versus affairs and things like that. So that is definitely an area that but we just have to work in that ecosystem too, and let go of a little control, and make sure that it says this is from Wikipedia. So that's not coming from the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. That is not part of what the Met is providing us, so that kind of thing. So I think you have to be a little squishy, but we also then, with the catalog raisonné, what I've committed to with this is once a year we go back and refresh everything. Now, of course, an institution can come to us and refresh earlier, or those that have APIs, it will be refreshed all the time. But making sure that at least we have one time a year, we're also checking in with each of the 140 institutions.
That's great. Thank you. All right, I think we have time for one last question. Also in the chat from Brenda. Love the interactive exhibition checklist. How do you deal with image rights for loaned objects in your exhibitions? What information do you share about them on your site? And does that content undergo editorial workflow involving lenders as well?
Great question. So we are doing the checklists for at least this phase, we're doing which O'Keeffes were in this exhibition. So we aren't getting into and it's been very controversial internally because everyone wants to share our full checklist, and we'll get there. I think one of the things that one of my underlying principles is like, let's start one place and we'll get to another place, or we'll just never get anywhere. So we share the Georgia O'Keeffe works that were in a collection, and things that are in our collection. So that means that if it's a show that's Georgia O'Keeffe, Marsden, Hartley, we only have the Georgia O'Keeffe. We will get there. I think we should get there, because that shows a full context, but that's a whole other can of worms, as you mentioned. One of the things that makes our life very much easier than, let's say, Andy Warhol or something like that, is that the Georgia O'Keeffe Foundation passed on the rights to the majority of, if you believe in copyright and things like that, that they passed on the majority of the rights to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. So I think there's only like 20 or so artworks that of her full body of work that we don't already claim or aren't already in the public domain. So that makes our lives a lot easier, particularly if we have those original scans that we also have the rights to from Malcolm Varon that made the catalog raisonné. So there are some various like little fine print that make this a lot easier for us than it might make for some of you doing similar projects. But of course, those transparencies, they're not the best colors, they're not the best scans. So we will, like, that was kind of a little bit of the prototype to show where we could get there. And now that we're doing the catalog raisonné, I would want to talk to each of those institutions and say, hey, you've got a great photograph of this on your website. Will you give us rights to share? Will you give us rights to do a downloadable PowerPoint ready copy? So we're also building the system that this person said yes, this person said no, this person said yes, this person said no, because I'd rather have the good copy, and hopefully we'll encourage people to allow us to download it there. And that's really helping the workflow of the researcher, hopefully of anyone making a checklist, and at least for those scholarly uses, bypassing any need to go through ARS and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that we would, as we look at having partners, I would want someone on the other side to review when we get it all out there. But I also hope that, I don't think we'll make that a stipulation, because if everyone's so busy that some places will review and some people won't. And so I would hate to not have it out there.
Well, thank you, Liz. That was wonderful. We're at noon, and I'm sure some people will have to start hopping off. But I also just found like so interesting your deep focus on the user workflows and needs driving all of that. It really kind of resonates with our most recent webinar right before this, in which we had a librarian and a researcher sort of talk about practices for research for their students and other things. So if anybody was interested in that part of Liz's work and wants to learn more about it, definitely check out our YouTube channel for that. Like I said, Liz's presentation will be posted to our YouTube channel shortly. We will be happy to welcome all of you to our next webinar. Will be sometime in June. Subject and exact date TBD, but stay tuned and we'll let you all know. So thank you everybody for joining, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Liz.
Bye.